A black FBI agent named Marcus is racially profiled by a white woman, Karen, while shopping in an electronics store. Despite her false accusations and attempts to humiliate him, Marcus remains calm as the store manager and other customers come to his defense, calling out Karen's prejudice. The incident sparks a conversation with a young boy who witnesses the event, teaching him an important lesson about respect and standing up for what's right. Ultimately, the situation highlights both the challenges of racial prejudice and the power of support and understanding. But before we get into the story, comment down below where you are watching this from, and don't forget to subscribe. In a bustling electronics store, Marcus, a well-dressed black man in his late 30s, browsed through the laptops on display. He had just finished a long shift as an FBI agent, still wearing his casual office attire, black slacks and a crisp white shirt with a badge subtly clipped to his belt. As he looked at a model he was considering, he noticed a woman approaching from the corner of his eye. She was a middle-aged white woman, her features tight with disapproval. She wore a designer purse slung over her shoulder and had that unmistakable air of entitlement. Marcus gave her no mind. He was focused on his task, but she seemed to be focused on him. "Excuse me," she snapped, her voice loud enough to turn heads. "Do you work here?" Without looking up, Marcus shook his head slightly. "No, ma'am." The woman, later identified as Karen by her receipts, huffed and took a step closer, arms crossed, glaring down at Marcus. "Then what are you doing behind the counter? I need help with this." She pointed aggressively at the item in her hand. Marcus looked up, confused. He wasn't behind any counter. He was just standing near one of the laptop displays. He furrowed his brows, unsure why this woman had approached him so aggressively. "Ma'am, I'm just a customer, like you." Karen's eyes narrowed in disbelief, her tone dripping with disdain. "A customer? Dressed like that? Do you really expect me to believe that?" She looked him up and down, sneering. "I've seen enough people like you pretending to belong here." A knot of tension formed in Marcus's chest, but he kept his cool. He was used to dealing with far worse in his line of work. "Ma'am, I'm not sure what you're implying, but I'm just here to buy a laptop. If you need help, there are store associates who can assist you." Karen wasn't having it. She scoffed loudly, her voice growing even more venomous. "Don't lie to me. People like you shouldn't even be in here. I've seen you people in these neighborhoods before, lurking around, up to no good. I'm calling the manager." Marcus stood still, his patience wearing thin, but he refused to escalate the situation. "There's no need for that. I'm sure someone will be happy to help you." But Karen was already storming off, flagging down a store associate and loudly complaining about the suspicious man she had encountered. By now, other customers had started to glance over, wondering what the commotion was about. Moments later, the store manager, a young man in his early 30s, arrived with Karen in tow. Her face was flushed with anger as she pointed at Marcus. "That's him. He's been loitering around, pretending to be a customer. You need to do something about this." The manager glanced at Marcus, his eyes immediately catching the FBI badge clipped to his belt. He blinked, a wave of realization hitting him. But before he could say anything, Karen continued. "I want him out of here. He doesn't belong, and he's making me uncomfortable. This place has standards, and people like him—" "Ma'am," the manager interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "This man isn't just a customer. He's with the FBI." The color drained from Karen's face, her mouth opening and closing as she struggled to process the information. Marcus, still maintaining his composure, reached into his pocket, pulling out his credentials. "Agent Marcus Bryant. Is there a problem?" The air in the store seemed to thicken as Karen realized her mistake, but instead of backing down, her face twisted with disbelief. I don't care if he's with the FBI," she stammered. "I know what I saw. He's not supposed to be here." The manager took a step closer to Karen, his patience wearing thin. "Ma'am, I think you should calm down and apologize. Agent Bryant is a respected member of law enforcement, and there's no reason for this confrontation." But Karen wasn't listening. Her face was flushed with embarrassment, but her pride wouldn't let her apologize. Instead, she turned on her heel, muttering angrily under her breath as she stomped toward the exit. Just as she reached the door, something unexpected happened. Just as Karen reached the door, a voice called out from behind her. "Ma'am, wait!" It wasn't the store manager or even Marcus who spoke. It was one of the other customers, a middle-aged black woman who had been watching the entire incident unfold. Her face was a mix of disbelief and indignation as she approached Karen, the woman's own shopping cart now forgotten. Karen turned to face her, her expression still set in a mask of anger, though there was a flicker of uncertainty behind her eyes. "You think you're just going to walk out of here without acknowledging what you did?" the woman said, her voice calm but sharp. "You humiliated that man, accused him of things he didn't do, all because you didn't like the way he looked." Karen's face flushed red again, but she wasn't the type to back down easily. "I don't need to explain myself to you," she snapped, her voice wavering slightly. "I saw what I saw." "You saw nothing but your own prejudice," the woman replied, unfazed by Karen's attempt at deflection. "And you should be ashamed of yourself." A murmur of agreement rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. More customers had been quietly watching, and now several of them were nodding in agreement, their expressions showing a mixture of support for Marcus and disgust at Karen's behavior. Karen, clearly rattled, looked around as though searching for someone to back her up, but no one came to her defense. Even the store employees seemed to be keeping their distance, clearly uncomfortable with the situation but unwilling to intervene on her behalf. Marcus, who had been watching all of this in silence, finally stepped forward. He could have said something earlier, could have made a bigger deal out of what had happened, but he'd seen people like Karen before. He knew that arguing with her directly would do little good. She wouldn't see reason. Still, seeing the growing support around him gave him a sense of quiet satisfaction. He looked at Karen, his expression neutral but firm. "You don't have to apologize to me, but maybe you should think about what just happened here." Karen opened her mouth as if to retort, but no words came out. Her anger seemed to falter as the reality of the situation sunk in. The silent judgment of the onlookers weighed heavily on her, and her bravado was slowly crumbling. Just then, another person stepped forward, a tall, wiry man with glasses, dressed in casual jeans and a t-shirt. He looked at Marcus, then at Karen, shaking his head. "You know, it's people like you who give everyone else a bad name," he said to Karen, his voice low but carrying weight. "You walk around acting like the world owes you something, and when you're proven wrong, you can't even own up to it." Karen looked like she wanted to disappear. She clutched her purse tighter to her chest and glanced toward the door, clearly calculating her escape. But as she took another step toward it, another voice piped up. "You know what?" It was the store associate, a young man who had initially been called over by Karen to intervene. He had been standing off to the side, unsure of what to do, but now he seemed emboldened by the crowd's reactions. "I think we should ask her to leave," he said, looking at the manager. "She's the one causing a disturbance, not Agent Bryant." The manager nodded slowly, as if coming to the same conclusion. "You're right," he said, turning to Karen. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store. We don't tolerate this kind of behavior here." Karen's eyes widened in disbelief. "What? You can't do that. I'm a paying customer." "And so is everyone else here," the manager replied firmly. "But you're the only one who's caused a scene. Please leave." For a moment, it looked like Karen was going to argue further. Her mouth opened and closed as she searched for something to say, but the weight of the situation finally seemed to settle in. She glanced one last time at Marcus, who stood calmly, his expression unchanged, and then at the other customers who were still watching her. With a final huff of indignation, Karen turned and stormed out of the store, the glass doors closing behind her with a definitive click. The tension in the room seemed to ease immediately, the hum of the conversations resuming as the crowd began to disperse. The woman who had spoken up earlier gave Marcus a nod of respect before returning to her shopping, and the man with the glasses gave him a thumbs up as he walked past. Marcus exhaled, finally allowing the moment to wash over him. He wasn't angry, not really. Disappointed, maybe. Frustrated. But he was used to this, used to handling situations that could have easily spiraled out of control. Today, it hadn't, thanks in large part to the people around him. The store manager stepped forward again, looking slightly sheepish. "Agent Bryant, I'm really sorry about that," he said. "If there's anything we can do to make up for what happened." Marcus shook his head, a small smile on his lips. "It's all right. I appreciate the support, but it's not the first time I've dealt with someone like her. Probably won't be the last either." The manager still looked apologetic. "Well, if you need anything, please let me know. The laptop's on us today. Least we can do?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That's very generous. Thank you." He could see the sincerity in the manager's eyes, and he knew the offer wasn't just about keeping a customer happy. It was an acknowledgement of the injustice he'd just witnessed. As Marcus gathered his thoughts and prepared to move on, something else caught his attention from the corner of the store. As Marcus scanned the corner of the store, he noticed a young boy, no older than 12, standing with wide eyes and a confused expression. The boy had been watching the entire incident from behind a display of headphones. His mother, a tall woman with curly hair, stood beside him, gently resting a hand on his shoulder. The boy tugged on his mother's sleeve, his voice low but clear enough for Marcus to hear. "Mom, why was that lady so mean to him? He didn't do anything wrong." His mother crouched down, her expression softening as she looked her son in the eye. "Sometimes people judge others based on how they look, not who they really are. It's wrong, but it happens." The boy frowned, glancing over at Marcus. "But he works for the FBI. Shouldn't people respect him?" The mother smiled sadly, brushing a lock of hair away from her son's face. "Yes, they should. But respect isn't always given when it should be. That's why it's important for people like us to stand up for what's right when we see things like this." Marcus, having overheard their conversation, felt a wave of emotions wash over him. He hadn't set out that morning to teach any lessons about racism or prejudice, but here it was, right in front of him, an innocent child trying to make sense of a world that didn't always make sense. The boy's mother noticed Marcus watching them and offered a warm smile. She stood up, gently nudging her son forward. "Go on, say hello," she encouraged him. The boy hesitated for a moment before slowly approaching Marcus, his hands stuffed in his pockets. When he finally stood in front of him, he looked up with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. "You're really in the FBI?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Marcus smiled, kneeling down to meet the boy's eye level. "Yeah, I am. It's a tough job, but it's something I've wanted to do for a long time." The boy's eyes lit up with excitement. "That's so cool. I want to do something important too when I grow up. But—" His voice trailed off and he glanced back at the door where Karen had exited. "But what if people don't respect me either?" Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the boy's words. "You know, respect isn't always about what other people think of you. It's about how you carry yourself, how you treat others, and how you stand up for what's right, even when it's hard." The boy nodded slowly, absorbing Marcus's words. His mother smiled again, clearly proud of the conversation. "I think you'll do something important," Marcus added, "and when people see who you really are, they'll respect you." The boy beamed, the doubt in his eyes replaced by newfound confidence. "Thanks, Agent Bryant," he said shyly. Marcus chuckled. "Call me Marcus." With that, the boy turned back to his mother, satisfied, and the two of them returned to their shopping. Marcus stood up, watching them walk away, and couldn't help but feel a sense of hope for the future. Even in moments like these, where the ugliness of prejudice reared its head, there were always opportunities for something good to come out of it. As he prepared to leave, the store manager approached him one last time, handing him the laptop he had been eyeing earlier. "Thank you again for your patience today," the manager said. "I hope this helps." Marcus took the laptop, nodding gratefully. "I appreciate it, and thanks for handling that the way you did." The manager smiled, looking relieved. "We try to make this a place where everyone feels welcome. Sorry it didn't go that way at first." Marcus gave him a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "It's not about what happens, it's how you respond. You did the right thing." As Marcus headed toward the exit, laptop in hand, he felt a mix of emotions: relief, frustration, but also a sense of accomplishment. Today had been another reminder of the uphill battle he and so many others faced, but it was also a reminder that for every Karen in the world, there were others who would stand up and do the right thing. And sometimes, that was all it took to make a difference. Stepping outside, Marcus glanced up at the sky, letting the cool breeze wash over him. The day wasn't over yet, but he had a feeling it had just taken a turn for the better. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing and commenting your favorite part.